So now we're going to add a planar tracker to repair that foreground element and bring back that wall. And I just want to do a quick demonstration with this little backdrop I created, Planar Understanding. Again, this is lesson number 4. So let's put my viewer to it, and you can see if I just scrub it across, basically from frames 1 to, looks like frames 44 or whatever, I have this animation. And I'm using T's for a reason. Usually I should have used the letter L, because you need a intersecting contrast point both in the X and the Y direction for anything to be tracked. And when you track an area with Planar Tracker, you have to have an intersecting contrast point both on X and Y. You really can't track edges that don't have a contrast point, such as the letter L, or I'm sorry, the letter I. So T and T is a perfect example, because you can see this is a very unique shape here and can actually be figured out from one point frame to another. So what I'm going to do is just kind of demonstrate for you to further understand good techniques using Planar Tracker. So let's say we wanted to planar track this object here and use it for whatever. It creates like a warp map. That's the best way to describe a planar tracking operation. I'm going to plug in a roto, and make sure you use a Nuke X for this. If you're not using Nuke X, you won't be able to do it. For those using the Personal Learning Edition, the Nuke, Nuke X and Nuke, and they have a bunch of Nuke versions. You got to make sure you're using Nuke X, or you won't have access to the Planar Tracker. So I'm going to take this roto node, plug it in, and I'm going to just quickly grab this here, okay, this little area. And with that area kind of selected, I can take the Bezier right-click and make it a planar, which makes it purple. What you get is a folder that's going to be dedicated to manual warp track, automated warp-based tracks. And Bezier is where you can counter-animate the animation. As you can see, the Bezier has one keyframe at frame 1 if I go to my dope sheet, and there's no keyframes on the folder itself. So this is sort of like offset animation, almost like if you do a motion capture data, and you were doing the offset animation. Back in the day when I used to work in the Mortal Kombat franchise, we used to motion capture somebody punching somebody in a mocap suit, but they would draw their punch far enough so they wouldn't actually hit the other actor, and then the animator would come in after the motion capture data has been captured and actually take the animation and do an offset animation to extend the animation hand out to actually hit the person in the 3D world for the action scene. So kind of think of this as this is automated tracks, this is your hand animated tracks if you need to use them. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and track. You can see up here we have the Planar Tracker selected. I'm at frame 1 as one keyframe, and I'm going to go try to click track to end. It's going to say no frame range on input clip, and that's because this is a combination of texts and transform. It's not actual physical footage. So what I have to do is hit this little button right here, track to end range, and I'm going to use the frame range from 1 to 50 and hit OK. And you'll see what's going to happen. It's basically a warp map. It's kind of averaging these distances and expanding out or inflating out your roto in accordance to what you see here. So the decision is between frames 1 and 45, or frames 1 and 50 I should say, where exactly do we come in here and decide which frame to do the tracking. I would say probably in the middle of this inflation. This could be probably just as similar as if you were moving towards an object or something like that. So you can see that it's like a warp map. That's what it's doing here. And you can see this shape. And I honestly, if I saw something like this, if it was a dolly shot moving in on an object, I would probably start at frame 25. And again, I could delete this Bezier again and do it again. If I wish, so I could actually come in here and I'll actually erase all of this, and I'll start again, and let's just go ahead and create another roto and drag it around, and I'll just kind of correct this a little bit here. There we go. And right click it and make it a planar track, and I'll track backwards this time. Again, it's saying I can't do it because of this, so I'm going to hit this R button here. And I'm going to go to frames 1 to 26 and hit back, and it's going to track from 26 backwards. So now you can see the shape is maintaining itself as best as it can. And then I'll go to 26, and now I scrub the 26. I'm just going to hit the R button again and put this from 26 to 50, 26-50, and hit OK. So now you can see we're getting a cleaner result because we're starting in the middle of the expansion of the scene. So that's one common technique. If you're trying to planar track something, like for instance the camera's moving towards a car is getting bigger in the shot, you would definitely want to probably start somewhere in the middle, then track back and track forward. You'll get a cleaner result, as you can see here. What this allows, this planar track information allows, is the Bezier, you can do a little bit offset animation. So say at frame 1, you know, this for some reason was supposed to be expanded down. I make one single keyframe there. Let's make a couple adjustments here. So you can see over here in my dope sheet, I now have 2 keyframes, right? So this allows me to do offset animation, and then I can keep going to frame 50. And if this kind of got outside of the shape that I wanted it to look, I can kind of put it into shape, move it in like that. So now I have 3 keyframes that are the offset animation of this. So again, just a good demonstration for you to kind of understand how this works. Now, if, say, the information goes off the frame, then you're going to have a problem. And that's why we had to clean up our shot using 3D tracking, because our actual area that we're cleaning up or moving the actor is actually going off the camera of the shot. Planar tracking is great for scenes where you actually don't have the actor go off the shot, and you can do a lot quicker cleanup work than what we did here. But in this case, I'm going to come in here and just use a planar track to rebuild that foreground wall. So we have this offshoot right here, so I'm going to do a roto node, and I'll plug that in right there and put my viewer to it. And then again, you get to choose what frame between frames 1 and 3, 1 and 132. Because this is just like, for instance, in the previous shot with the letter T's, I'm moving in and out. Basically, I'm walking towards the actor and walking away from the actor. So I'm going to choose the, the middle ground, like, say, right here. Or, you know what, probably a better idea is start at frame 90. Again, 90 shows us the most amount of real estate here, as you can see, and we can try to grab as much as we possibly can. Whenever I create any sort of roto for planar, I start with what I call a kind of a crap or just a rough roto for the sake of tracking contrast points, and then I replace it. So now I'm just going to come in and create a roto. I'm going to try to get close to the edge, but I'm not going to actually stay outside of the edge like this, because data in the back can actually sway these points. So I'm going to try to stay right on the line if I can. It's going to track any points in here that have contrast points. In other words, T intersection or L intersection areas. And that's going to create my grid warp, as I demonstrated with the letters earlier. So I'm going to try to move this over here. And I basically want to track the very area that I want to recreate, right? So I'm just going to grab all this good stuff here and move my way down here. Now I have to right click and take this and turn it into a planar tracker. And again, I have a keyframe at 60, so I'm going to have to track forward, and then I'm going to have to track back. So let's choose whichever direction. I'm at frame 90. I currently have the planar tracker in here. Sometimes it says none, so you got to make sure it's actually loaded up. And we're going to take this and say track to end, and we're going to go forward with it. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're using translate, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective, which is what you should use. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Now, this stuff is actually leaving the frame, and we talked about how that's a dangerous reality. But the great thing about this program is it interpolates the data of where things are sort of offshooting out here based on the data here. So it's like a perspective sort of dictation from this area here. And it should hold up pretty well. So you can see if I take a look, it's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to scrub back to frame 90, and now I'm going to track backwards, so track to start. You can also use this track to reverse and choose the frame range. Otherwise, you can hit cancel to stop if it goes too far. So again, I have kind of demoed this before in my previous training. But again, you can see this is a rough roto. I haven't made it beautiful yet. I just use it as a rough roto to get planar information, and then I'm going to go in and create my own roto information. So I just let this, you can see things are going off the frame here, but they're holding up pretty well. Sometimes if things if they go off the frame too much, this starts to wig out and go crazy. But you can see just the way that the Foundry has built this piece of this tool set, it really kicks butt. So I have this Bezier now, and I'm going to go ahead and delete it because I don't need it anymore. I have all the actual data of the grid warp here based in the folder, and I just have to create another Bezier in the folder that's more exact. So I'm going to go to frame 90 again, where I see the most of this entire scene. I'm going to grab my Bezier, and I'm going to make sure that I select this folder, create a Bezier, left mouse click and drag, and I'm going to get right on that line right there. And we'll come back and refine this in a minute, but I'm going to try to create as least amount of points as possible here. So I can hold down Control and drag out one of the handles and break the handle so I get like a nice sharp edge. But I always want to just click and drag out, and then I kind of create a lip over here. I'll just move my way down here. And yeah, that should do it. So I just give myself a little bit of kind of a nice soft tab for rebuild. And now I'm going to come in here and just kind of refine this out. Don't be afraid to use your gammas or your exposures up and down to kind of see the edge. Sometimes it's hard to see the edge, and we have a little bit of a soft edge, so we're going to have to add a little bit of a feather here to kind of soften this up. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of get that situated. And now that I place this in on a single frame, you can see that it pretty much sticks together, which is pretty awesome. Now, I have a keyframe at 90. I'm going to have to make a couple keyframes because it will shift a little bit. So I'm going to go over at least 10 to 20 frames away and just investigate and go, okay, maybe I got to just offset this a little bit because it's kind of losing. And it should hold up pretty well depending on how close you got to the edge from the original roto. I'm not really worried about this edge here. I'm just making sure I don't go too far out or this way. So I'm just going to put that right there. And then again, I'll go a whole bunch of frames forward. And we'll just come in here and make a keyframe. Again, you can see it's holding up pretty well, actually. There's a little bit of curvature movement there that I want to grab a hold of. There we go. And then what happens is I have a keyframe here, I have a keyframe here, and then I'll go in between the two keyframes if I need to and see if I need to add keys. Work smart, not hard. You don't have to add a million keyframes, and you don't want to have keyframes sitting right next to each other, because you'll get a jitter effect if you're not careful. So I'm just making ever so slight adjustments because the actual automated track is never perfect. So, all right, now I'll go this way. You can see there's that keyframe. I'm going to move up a little bit, and I got to just do ever so slight little adjustments in here. And then finally we'll come to the end of the shot, frame 132. And again, you want to be meticulous about this because believe me, compositors will spot laziness. You cannot get away with being lazy. You have to just take the time to be meticulous on this, or else you will never work in this industry. Okay, so that looks good. We also, it's good to also play it, allow it to cache. Again, you can't judge it unless you cache it. And just to see, it's going to be off by one keyframe when you cache it, so it'll look like it's not actually sticking on there. But if you allow this to cache through with all this being orange, you should see that it'll stick on pretty good. So just give it some time. Eventually you're going to get all the frames cached, and now you can make a judgment call and see if there's any shifting, or maybe you have to add keyframes. It's rock solid. That's why people love the trusted and true planar tracking, but planar tracking only works for you if the object itself doesn't go off the frame dramatically, completely off the frame. In this case, it's going a little bit off the frame, but we could still use the interpolation because we began our track at frame 90 when the full object was in display. Not a good idea to track this at frame 1 because we'd be introducing this bottom part all of a sudden later on the shot, and then we'd have bad interpolation, and this whole thing would probably blow up. So with that said, let's go ahead and take this and use it. So all we need to do now is do an M for merge, and we use B for background, A for a top, which will be this piece here. And we want to set this roto to output alpha, premult RGB, and hit replace. And now you can see we have that. We probably want to add a little bit of a feather on here, so I'll take the Bezier and do a negative feather, maybe -2. If you feel you need more feather, and you can see we've set 5 or 6 keyframes, what I usually do is I'll sit on a keyframe. Doesn't matter, you don't even have to sit on a keyframe. but you can come in here and turn on your ripple edit tool, which actually offsets every single animation, and you could build in a fade if you wish. So if you can see, if I just play it through now, it has offset all the frames. If you forget to not use this ripple edit tool and you hold down control and drag out a feather, it's going to animate the feather in and out. So you got to make sure that when you do use ripple edit, you have it on, and then when you're done with it, you best turn that sucker off, because you will have it'll kill you if you're setting keys on other stuff. You'll know it's on because they give you this warning red sign here. All right, so with that said, let's take a look at what we got with the final merge here. So just pull that over here, and we are just about done with this 3D cleanup area. I'll hit the letter Q to hide all of the displays. Hit spacebar, hit the letter H to frame it up. And as you can see, we have completed our work. That may be a little bit soft down or hard right here, so I might want to harden up the edge or soften up the edge of the mat. But because we actually roto painted in a little bit here, so that's actually black here in the roto paint, when this comes in, we don't see a slit. If you see like some kind of line or slit there, it's because you didn't roto paint further in. One of the other things as a compositor you should do is realize that this may look good in front of you as you're watching it, but remember, different displays have different gammas. So for instance, the Rec. 709 has a different gamma curve than, say, the sRGB curve that we look at on monitors. So it's always good to just judge this area by adjusting your gamma a little bit low and then a little bit high, especially high. You're going to start to see the artifacts of any clone work you've done. For instance, you can see I got like a zigzag here. I see a little bit of a weird black patch in here. This line probably could have come across. This is important because, again, this can be displayed on multiple monitors that might be a little bit brighter or darker in the gamma, and they're going to catch on to your bad work that's in the darkness because it'll be brightened up on the monitor. So it's always good just to go into a negative gamma or positive gamma a little bit to see how things are doing. So I probably would make a judgment call and fix this paint work up here. I probably would kind of do a little bit more clone work in here. You can see this is just pitch black in this area. But you're probably never going to get this high in gamma, but maybe you'll get about that high. So I'm going to click off of this and just allow this to cache one more time, just see how it is. My judgment call is that I probably need to soften this edge up a little bit. So let's come over here, and yeah, it's definitely too hard. So let's go back to my roto here, and I'm going to take my feather, which looks like I never feathered it. Thought I did. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. Whoa! So I want to feather that probably down, probably about -4. And again, if you find that that's too much, I've never been a fan of these feathers and feather fall-offs. You can see they're a bit strange in the way they are. So if you wanted to, like I mentioned before, you can turn on your ripple edit tool. And if you like more feather in certain areas, you can expand these out, hold down control, and drag your inner point. Again, you're creating an offset on all of these points here. So this is allowing for you to get a little bit softer in these areas here. Just make sure the dotted line is on the outside here. And just kind of drag that in like that. So now if I hit the letters, if you can see, turn off that ripple edit tool when you're done. And now you can see we have this nice offset here. That looks pretty good. Still feels a little bit hard on this edge, so I might come in here and make a couple adjustments. Again, I'll turn on my ripple edit tool, see if I can get a feather in here. Expand this out. And yeah, you got to be very careful. This is with great power, it comes great responsibility with this ripple edit tool. So just giving you a warning. And now we have that nice soft edge. The best way to judge any of this, obviously, is to look at your original plate. So the best way to do that is put your viewer to the original plate, and that would be this remove node. And then put your viewer to the second merge node, zoom in, full frame it, hit H, and go between 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. See what has changed. And you can see like this probably tells me I need to clone this darkness. This darkness is actually there for a reason. I thought this was supposed to continue, but I guess not. So you can kind of see the difference. In this case, we definitely have a heavy need for, we need to break this up a little bit because it's way too sharp down here. And had we not done this comparison to our original plate, we would have never known. So again, I'm just going to put my viewer here again, go back to this roto here, hit Q, see if I can kind of, again, I got my ripple edit tool on, which I should have turned off. So I'm going to pull this out so now I can get a nice heavy gradient there. I got to be careful. So yeah, let's pull this guy back. There we go. And again, I'll turn on letter Q just so I can see how it looks. And I would say we are in the ballpark pretty good here. Okay, so I'm going to put my viewer here and full frame this, play it through, and we'll come back and take a look at it in a second. So I'll hit pause. So there we go. And then again, you can see it's looking really, really good. The edge is nice and soft. Everything feels natural. There's no jitter. There's no floating. There's no weirdness. Again, make sure you turn off your ripple edit tool when you're done, because if you do not, it's your best friend, but it can be your worst enemy if you keep this thing on and you're making rotos and you don't even realize it's on. So be very, very careful with that, like I said before. So this is looking good, and now we're going to move on to our next lesson.